There's been a lot of discussion lately about the somewhat recent string of incredible fantasy manga. Frieren is the big one, especially with its recent adaptation, but other series are making waves as well. And in this video, I'm going to look at one of my personal favorite ongoing manga, Hat Atelier. This video will be spoiler free for the first half, and then I'll go in depth with character arcs, analysis of the themes, and predictions of the future of the manga. But it'll be very clearly marked whenever we're going into spoiler territory. This will be the first in a series of videos where I'm going to cover all these fantasy manga, so be sure to subscribe for future videos, where I'm going to cover Frieren and some other series. Thanks for watching, and let's start.
The world of WHA Atelier isn't fair, but it's also filled with wonder. Magic is a beautiful thing that can make everybody's lives better, but it's also infinitely dangerous. WHA Atelier has one of my favorite magic systems in all of fantasy. I personally think it's up there with Hunter x Hunter's Nin and Fullmetal Alchemist Alchemy, and it does this without much focus on battles, and I'd argue that this is because it has most of the strength of hard magic systems, plus those of a softer magic system. Hard and soft magic systems are terms coined by the GOAT Brandon Sanderson. Hard magic means that magic behaves a bit like a science, where there are defined rules and restrictions, like alchemy or Mistborn's allomancy. Soft magic, on the other hand, is your more traditional Tolkien-esque magic, where it's a lot more mysterious and less constrained. I think that many people, myself included, prefer hard magic systems as they make the stakes more apparent, can create mind game fights, and have less "a wizard did it" moments of plot convenience. WHA Atelier is a hard magic system with rules and signs and laws that dictate the powers of magic, but most of these restrictions are artificially put in place by the civilization, and therefore magic actually has practically no natural restrictions. But it's because of this infinite power and the unknown side effects that come with using the restricted magic that makes it so dangerous and interesting. In WHA Atelier, a single witch can theoretically use magic to cause infinite destruction. In the past, the world was in a constant state of turmoil, as kings and witches partnered together to engage in constant, world-shattering wars. Eventually, witches conspired to hide the truth behind magic, banning a large amount of spells, mainly those which directly impacted the human body and those which were too powerful. They made most people believe that magic was a genetic gift, that you had to be born a witch. And through this and liberal usage of a memory wiping spell that they conveniently didn't outlaw, they were able to ensure that most witches kept the secret, didn't ally with any particular kingdoms, and didn't use forbidden magic. This creates a great central moral dilemma for the series, one which keeps the unique magic system very central. Forbidding all magic that affects human bodies means no more medical magic. The consequences for breaking the rules are ruthless and unforgiving, and the world has a hidden caste system, where a person's birth determines their access to magic, and access to it greatly enhances their lives. So the ordinary people who have no access also have no idea that the world is built on a lie, and that they are having many opportunities taken from them. Our protagonist Coco was one of those non-magical people. She was obsessed with magic from a very young age, but believed that she could never do it. But one day, a witch arrives at her house, and Coco discovers the secret to making magic. You draw it. And this is another strength of the magic system: it looks amazing. Intricate circle designs not only look cool, but are also incredibly functional. The sigils can be combined in many ways, and to the point that fans can create their own spells that make sense. Also, throughout the story, creating spells is treated a lot like the artistic process of drawing. So it's really neat to see the characters training their magic through ways inspired by real drawing and art techniques. After Coco learns of the secret of magic, she copies drawings from a book that she got from a mysterious figure years ago, and she creates her own magic for the first time. This is one of my favorite scenes in the manga, as it's such a beautiful and joyful moment for Coco. Even though this is the very first chapter, I was already very attached to her struggles, and this moment really feels like something that she's been pining for her entire life. I think that a good comparison for this would be My Hero Academia, which does a very similar thing, where Izuku, someone who is born without powers in a superhero society, one day discovers that he actually has a chance to become a hero. However, while MHA's was powerful and works pretty well, it also seems a bit cheap. The beginning of the series seemed to be setting up Izuku as someone who wasn't privileged, who didn't have powers, and was somehow overcoming all the barriers and becoming a hero. And while this is obviously a pretty unrealistic story, it does feel a little bit cheap that this problem is solved by just sidestepping it and giving Izuku a ridiculously powerful quirk. But Coco, on the other hand, isn't so lucky. By just drawing these spells without knowing what they actually do, she accidentally transformed her mom and house into stone. Due to the secrecy of the pact that witches created, she was ignorant, and accidentally caused great amounts of harm. After this, she becomes a witch and swears to find a way to save her mom. And as the series goes on, she is put in the difficult position of now being on the other side of that magic knowledge divide, knowing that she's hiding the truth of magic from non-witches, and knowing that she used to be just like them. WHA Atelier builds a world with an incredibly unfair, terrible system. But despite it having many obvious flaws, there is real reasoning for the existence of the system, and this makes the core conflict of the story a very complex one. And as it goes on, the manga also explores how different characters' backgrounds of magic have shaped their worldview, and how their differing levels of privilege lead to rifts in their relationships. So that's a basic introduction to the series, but why do I think it's part of this so-called fantasy anime revolution? Well, first off, it obviously has a great magic system and world, in sharp contrast to the basic RPG-inspired fantasy that a lot of modern anime has. I'm not even really hating on these fantasy stories, as a lot of them are great in their own ways, but even in a great anime like Re:Zero, which excel in many ways, the magic system looks like it was ripped right out of a JRPG, down to buffs and debuffs and Final Fantasy style spell tiers. I personally just really like seeing a high fantasy world filled with everyday magic that adheres to a very unique magic system. But beyond that, I think the tone of the series is incredibly interesting and pretty unique, despite the background world and a lot of the plot being pretty dark, with the unfair world and constant deception. It also keeps a very hopeful tone and outlook, and the early chapters especially have a somewhat childlike whimsy to it, and I love it. It reminds me of shows like Avatar, and this might be the best execution of this style that I've seen since Avatar. There are basic lessons of friendship, artistic pursuit, and it can all be a bit on the nose at times. But there are also very interesting looks into Coco's idealism and how her pure intentioned actions often have unintentional consequences. There's also a lot of focus on the pact of secrecy, and the difficulties and dangers that come with hiding magic from the majority of people, how the rules can get in the way of helping magic and saving lives, but also the very real danger that forbidden magic can bring. One non-manga point of comparison that I think is incredibly interesting is how this compares to Harry Potter, which has a very similar world with similar problems, but it's so telling with the difference in how they're approached. Harry Potter has a similar pact, where witches and wizards keep magic completely hidden from most muggles, which is never even questioned. This pact means that wizards stay out of muggle problems which they could easily solve, like most medical things, conflicts, and more. Furthermore, wizards, even the ones that are portrayed as the good guys, really think of themselves as better than muggles, with a very small population of them having a very oversized influence on the UK and the world as a whole. There are also a few strange plot issues, like how wizards really shouldn't be able to be poor with all the spells and magic they have. They really should be in a post-scarcity society, but somehow they aren't. Slavery is also common, and Hermione is made fun of for opposing it. Well, all these strange contradictions likely stem from the author's J.K. Rowling's beliefs and biases, as she is a big fan of the status quo, especially in this escapist world she has constructed, and she seems to think that the pact is actually great. Hogwarts, which puts all of its students in constant danger, is actually great. Slavery? Well, the elves actually like it, and Dobby is just cringe. Harry Potter himself really has no problems with the state of the world either. All the problems are never systemic, and there are no unjust institutions, just bad actors. And if you replace them with totally qualified and cool people like Dumbledore, it's all good. Now compare that to WHA Atelier, and it's a world of difference. Despite also having a pretty escapist tone at times, the pact is constantly questioned, to the point that it's practically the whole premise for the story. Coco's entire character is defined by always fighting for the good of the people around her, even whenever the whole world stands in her way. And while she always tries to work within the rules of the pact, Coco and other characters are willing to challenge authority in order to help others in any way possible, which is very refreshing. Talking more about this magic system, I think the way that a fantasy story utilizes its magic system says a lot about the story and what it focuses on. A truly great fantasy should have a magic system that is not only interesting in battle and everyday life for the characters, but also has mechanics that tie into the themes and focuses of the story. Once again, looking at Fullmetal Alchemist, the magic system of alchemy is defined by the rule of equivalent exchange. In order to get something, you must give something. And this ties into the rest of the story, where many characters are defined through their relationships with this fair but often cruel rule. Even in Harry Potter, which I did just bash a bit, the magic system is mostly focused on fun enchanted objects and quirky little charms. Harry Potter is geared towards escapism, and so the spells reflect that, creating a world filled with everyday magic that makes life a little bit more interesting. In Hat Atelier, magic is both a wondrous thing that allows witches to express themselves and literally make their dreams come true, but is also a terrifyingly powerful thing. Magic is literally infinite, and in the wrong hands, that means infinitely dangerous. The existence of magic, which can literally do anything, raises many questions. Like sure, that means that any injury or illness can be healed, but it also means that immortality could possibly be feasible. And also with infinite power comes infinite possible consequences. The powers that be have decided that magic should be limited. Anybody who doesn't conform to their rules should have their memories wiped and be removed from the world of magic. This is the core of all conflict of the story, and the many angles at which this is explored through are all incredibly interesting. Also finally, the art. It's the best of any manga that I've ever read. Not just the style and quality of characters, poses, and backgrounds, but the paneling itself is incredible. It often uses intricate borders and shapes, which gives it the unique look of a classic storybook. Panels are often creatively included into the scenes, especially whenever the characters are drawing magic. For instance, this page, which has the magic circle incorporated into this world of violence panel, thematically shows a connection between the power of magic and the horrors they can bring about. Another great example comes from a recent chapter, where flashback panels pile up to illustrate the memories that Coco has accumulated and is referencing in the conversation. There's also really cool and dynamic action art, and in general, art inspires a sense of wonder and hope incredibly well. Okay, so that's all the non-spoiler stuff I'm gonna say. It's time to dive into some character arcs. So this is spoiler territory for the whole series, right up to the latest chapter. And if you haven't watched it yet, then I recommend you use YouTube chapters to skip this part and go to the end of the video, where I have a conclusion. Coco is an outsider, and this is a very common trope in hidden world fantasy, because it gives the story an excuse to explain all of its inner workings to the main character and by proxy, the audience. But this also gives Coco a very unique dynamic within the world, as her very existence should be illegal. She should have had her memory wiped the second she learned of magic. But Keyfree relented, and so Coco looks at the world from the perspective of someone who has once denied entry into it, which allows her to easily empathize with people like Kustas, who would benefit immensely from being given the privilege of magic. This outsider perspective also gifted her with the ability to view all magic, even the most basic spells, with pure wonder. But Coco is a main character, and she also demonstrates many of the symptoms that usually come with main characteritis. She is headstrong, kind, and dedicated, and she works hard to make up for all the years of training which she missed out on. I think Coco is an excellent protagonist. She not only embodies innocent idealism, but has also experienced the darker side of the world, both the dangers of forbidden magic as well as the ruthlessness of the rules. In the narrative, Coco is constantly pulling the other characters towards helping others, while also challenging their worldviews. This is demonstrated early on through her interactions with Agato, who serves as a foil to her. Coco's attitude of always using her magic to help others contrasts with Agato's self-centered magic, and they both learn from each other, illustrated by moments like whenever she snaps Agato into helping save Kostas whenever their cart falls, or whenever Coco leads the efforts to save the people from the leech. She's also very rebellious, but not in some sort of angsty way. She genuinely only wants to help people, and so she fights the systems and rules that get in her way of doing so. Throughout the story, we often see Coco struggle to learn magic, as she has a big disadvantage, starting much later than the others. It's through her that we get to see a lot of the fun parallels between magic and drawing, and there are two main ideas that are emphasized with casting magic: knowledge and ideas. Knowledge accompanies drawing technique alongside knowledge of different skills and ways to arrange them, while ideas is all about applying this knowledge to situations, often in unique ways. Coco has a knack for coming up with ideas, but we also see her struggle with both of these categories, as she gradually improves her technique and knowledge of skills over time and runs into artist blocks a few times in the story. Coco always has the question of how to save her mom in the back of her head, and we see her struggle with the anxiety that may be impossible after they are unable to remove the wolf tattoos from Uni. She fears that even if she reaches the Tower of Tomes, she may find out that the only way to remove the curse is through forbidden magic. Coco's inciting incident with her mom also highlights one of the core issues with the pact. People will inevitably find out about magic, and it'll likely be from a Brimtat witch. So the people won't know the dangers of forbidden magic, and by hiding this truth, the Pointed Hat witches are dooming people to suffer from their ignorance. In some of the most recent arcs, Coco has begun to wonder why witches and normal people were ever separated. These feelings stem from her experiences with Kustas, seeing all the poor and disenfranchised people whose lives would be made infinitely better through magic, through seeing the girl who is just like her, and seeing that girl's dreams be crushed because of how she was born. Coco really seems to be losing patience with the unjust order that rules the world. However, in contrast to Harta and Kustas, who completely distrust and reject authority, Coco is still willing to trust in some people, specifically Keyfree. He's given her no reasons to believe that he will sell her out. I think that this is a very important character trait that is also highlighted by Agato whenever she thinks about how Coco was willing to take advice even in the middle of the procession. Coco is very trusting, and she understands that other people are often more knowledgeable than her, so she's always willing to listen to advice and take their help without a trace of ego. Finally, one thing that we see brewing in the background throughout the entire series is the Brimtats, and how they see her as the child of hope. For whatever reason, whenever Coco was very young, Aiken chose her as the unknowing girl who he gave the book filled with forbidden magic to. The Brimtats seem to think that if Coco starts using forbidden magic to help people, they'll encourage other witches to reconsider their thoughts of forbidden magic. Agat is definitely introduced as a prick. She's obviously got something against Coco, as she immediately claims that what happened to Coco's mother was Coco's fault, and demands that she take the apprentice test in order to prove herself. Agat expects that Coco will fail the test and will be unable to become an apprentice, and doesn't respond whenever Coco manages to pass the test. Her actions seem to stem from her own self-consciousness, as Agat constantly wants to prove herself and demonstrate that she's better than the ones around her. She does genuinely have a lot of skill from her extremely dedicated practice though. Plus, she's a quick thinker and always trying to better herself. However, she often has her priorities in the wrong spot, as she's more focused on proving herself and rushing towards improvement, and leads things like helping others with her magic and doing the small things behind, as she deems easy things like using contraptions to help people is below her. This also often leads her to become frustrated with her progress, as she's so focused on how much more she needs to learn that she doesn't realize how far she's already come. Almost everything that Agat does can be directly traced back to her core desire of proving herself to her mother. Whenever she was young, she was accused of attempting to pass off another witch's spell as her own. She was afraid to speak up at the time and was cast out from her prestigious family. So now she studies under Kefri, attempting to prove everyone wrong and become a librarian at the Tower of Tomes. But after Coco's arrival, Agat's outlook has begun to change, as Coco reminds Agat of why she loves magic in the first place. Coco's focus on helping others with her magic, her ingenuity, her adaptation, and her dedication to become better slowly begin to endear Coco to Agat. And gradually, Agat begins to look at magic and learning through different eyes. Coco and Agat have a symbiotic relationship, where Coco helps Agat to be more selfless and shows her the joys of helping others with her magic, while Agat reminds Coco of the value of creating magic for herself. After the second pentagram test is interrupted by the brimmed hat witches, and the apprentices get another chance to have a makeup test, Agat initially approaches it as yet another way to show off her skills. However, Coco makes her realize that she should instead be tailoring her magic to impress and satisfy Belderoots, focusing on his wants over just showing off her own skill. And I think that Agat finally begins to warm up to Coco at around this time, when Agat thanks Coco for repairing her shoes and begins to offer to teach Coco more types of magic. And whenever the Silver Eye Festival rolls around, it seems like Agat initially doesn't actually want to go, as she knows her family and mother will be there, and she knows that it'll be a lot of work for her to show off to them there. But whenever it's determined that they're going, she decides that she wants to perform in the procession, but only wants to do it to show off to her mom and to draw attention to herself, her usual motivations. But after being denied her chance to perform, she pivots to creating a magical item to show off. We see that Agat initially hoped that Coco can't get in the procession, and then gets angry at herself for thinking that way. She's still competing with everyone around her, and trying to think of Coco as lesser than herself. However, whenever the procession draws near, Agat helps Coco break through her artist block. She almost didn't help, halfway hoping that Coco will give up and lessen her competition, but she forces herself to stop that way of thinking. And then, whenever she sees Coco struggling on stage, she gives up her chance to show off her own magic and joins Coco on stage, using her skill of decorative sigils and a bit of her understanding of the selfish desires of the public in order to help market Coco's selfless device. Speaking of which, Agat has a love for signs of decor. She really enjoys the magic even if it's not practical. It's what brings her joy to make, and when Agat gets to draw these signs to cheer Coco up, she finally realizes why people draw for others. Agat learns to get a lot out of creating useless magic that brings a bit of levity for the people, like the girl at the evacuation site, and she's finally embracing her love for vanity magic and trying to focus on helping others. And in this moment, whenever she's not trying to show off, her mother just so happens to notice her. And of course, to wrap it all up, her useless decorative sigils just so happen to come in handy for targeting just a leech, as she's the only one who has a sigil for it. I do hope that the conclusion isn't just Agat finally earning her mother's love and attention back, as that's pretty messed up, and I don't think the mangaka would make such a tone-deaf decision. Hopefully, Agat will learn to reconcile her need for her mother's approval, and maybe call out her mom for just kinda being a terrible parent. Yeah, banish a child just because someone accused them of plagiarism. Great idea. Tetsuya has a lot in common with Coco whenever it comes to her motivations to using magic. Tetsuya is all about helping others with magic, and she loves to get thanks for her help. She's very upbeat and positive, and even just after meeting Coco, whenever she learns that Coco is going to take the first test alone, she is deeply worried of her being hurt. Tetsuya and WHA have a lot in common, as they both talk a lot about sharing their magic with the world, and both have particular sorts of magic that they focus on. Tetsuya likes to make friendly magic, soft things like clouds, and also always seems to use sand whenever making things. Tetsuya encounters one of her biggest character moments during the second test, whenever she decides to talk to the Gilded Romanions. Tetsuya seeks to help them, as they had been subjected to a cruel, immortal fate, transmuted into gold by the witches of the past. Tetsuya speaks of her magic and how she seeks to create spells that help others, and she believes that modern witches are different from the ones that cursed the Romanions, and now they seek to help people. Coco recognizes that the thing the witches of old stole from the Gilded Romanions was comfort, and Coco offers a snug stone, a stone that produces heat, in hopes of providing a minor comfort for those stuck that year. The magic object created by Orugio reflects the exact sort of magic that Tetsuya wishes to create. It's gentle and happy, but the Gilded people amplify this gentle spell, turning it into a cruel warmth. Its ravaging heat mercilessly melts their bodies and finally releases them from their fate. Despite it killing them, the Gilded people thank Coco and Tetsuya for their gift. Tetsuya and Coco certainly did help the cursed people, but it was far from ideal. They were limited by their abilities and the abilities of witches as a whole. And this incident leads to Tetsuya declaring that she hopes to never have to hear another thank you that sounds so sad. Despite her initial wishes, this event also proves that sometimes, in order to create magic that is truly kind and helpful, you can't just make magic that is comforting and soft. Some terrible problems call for a cruel solution. Finally, like so many other characters, Tetsuya has a moment whenever the rules of the pact get in the way of her helping people, whenever she's invited by a nurse to help save people from the bleeding and initially refuses because witches can't do medical work. The doctor there just tells her that anybody who's trying to limit what she can learn is just trying to control her. And Tetsuya then wonders if it's okay to keep the secret to magically clean water from the people. She's seeing how the witches have forced society to be reliant on them by holding the secrets to magic, and how that affects normal, everyday people. And Tetsuya realizes that she believes witches and regular people shouldn't be kept apart, although Agathe is still strictly against it. WHA refers to herself in the third person. Yeah, it's kind of annoying. I guess it could be worse, but I've never liked it whenever characters have unrealistic speech quirks. Oh yeah, and WHA is also very stubborn and childish, constantly rebelling against authority figures. She doesn't want to change herself. She's very opposed to somehow losing what makes her and her magic WHA, and she doesn't want to lose her unique magic. Because of this, she actively fights against learning more magic. WHA has lagged behind in her studies because of this, and there is a lot of magic that she can't do. But despite this, she has focused very closely on crystal magic and drawing small, intricate glyphs. She also has a unique approach to problem solving, as she often works to find unique solutions to problems she faces in tests and in other situations. Later on, WHA is signed up for the second test even though she doesn't want to take it. She is against all tests as she thinks they are restrictive, but through her experience in this test, and specifically from meeting Uni, we get to learn a lot more about WHA, and she begins to open up to the possibility of learning more about magic. Throughout the test, she constantly tries to avoid doing it the right way, and instead solves the problems through her own unique way. All throughout her life, people have tried to force her not to use useless magic, and instead do everything the proper way. Everyone that is, except for her brother, Rilefin. Everyone that is, except for her brother, Rilefin. Rilefin encouraged her unique magic, and now she associates her magic with the praise that she once received from her brother who is no longer present. Rilefin was also physically and verbally abused by his teacher, who also forced WHA to do magic exactly the way that he wanted her to. So she fought back against him and against society as a whole in a pretty extreme way, avoiding learning any new magic as she believes that it will stifle her individuality. Agathe tells WHA that WHA can't help him in the way that she is now. If she had learned more about magic and expanded her horizons, it's likely that she could have done more to help. She also realizes that everybody has their own unique style of magic. Even Uni, who has constantly been demeaned by his own abusive teacher and forced into a very cookie-cutter style of magic to solve the test. Despite this, he has accounted for his nervousness and shaky hands by planning ahead and drawing spells in advance, and also modifying the standard spells by adding more sigils to make up for their shakiness. She recognizes that even whenever using textbook magic, Uni's magic still reflects him. It reflects unique ways that Uni has had to overcome its own hurdles, and what he values whenever creating magic. WHA realizes that, through limiting what she could learn, she has caged herself. She was afraid to allow herself to learn and to change, but now she understands that she just has to trust that she won't lose the thing that made her special by learning, and she also ends up saving the day by bringing Orugio to the test. She might have a lot to learn, but she still does all that she can to help. She's built a connection with Uni, and she promises to show him all the new magic that she's learned once they reunite. Later on, WHA creates a crystal bracelet for two people that can create a line that points at the other person whenever activated. It shows that she's learning new sigils for things like lasers in order to make magic that is still very distinctly WHA. Kifri was the one who accidentally revealed magic to Coco, and it's only through his kindness that Coco is given a chance to become his apprentice and work to save her mom. But right away, he shows a willingness to bend the rules by taking Coco on as an apprentice. And like many of the main characters, he will show a real rebellious streak as the series goes on. Kifri has been obsessed with tracking down the Brimmed Hats as he secretly saw Coco as a way for them to find them, as he realized that Brimmed Hat was the one who gave Coco her book full of forbidden magic. This grudge to give the Brimmed Hat sometimes gets in the way of Kifri's kind attitude towards his apprentices and others, which is shown whenever he wipes Mr. Nonola's memory. I think that his darker side is incredibly interesting as it gives Kifri a lot of texture, and it also leads to a bit of conflict between him and the rest of witch society. Beyond that, Kifri has a pretty unique teaching style, with him focusing on each witch's individual skills and styles of magic. While he still teaches textbook magic, he also doesn't force it on WHA, and he encourages his students to hone their unique talents while putting extra focus into what parts of magic they have issues with. Kifri has been chasing the Brimmed Hats his entire life, and the second test, he finally gets a chance to face one. He shows off here that he's been hiding an arsenal of spells, but beyond that, he's also just really clever, instantly figuring out Sasaron's secret and trying to capture him. We're also revealed a bit of information here as Kifri grills Sasaron on if he has seen a Brimmed Hat with the same eye as Kifri. We later find out that when our village root first found Keyfree, he had just been mind wiped and had his right eye stolen, left in a casket to die. Both Belligeroot and Orugio believe that Keyfree is putting Coco and his other apprentices in danger by continuing to keep them in a place where the brimmed hats can reach them, and they both suspect that he is using Coco as bait. And we also see in a flashback that Keyfree learned in the Tower of Tones that he couldn't regain his eye and memories even if recovered without turning to dark magic. But it's also shown time and time again that Keyfree constantly puts the apprentice's needs first, and he tries his best not to endanger him. But despite all this, Keyfree also often engages in self-sacrificial actions whenever seeking revenge against the Brim Hats, and he absolutely refuses to get others' help in this quest. I think that this is just another extension of him protecting the people around him, trying to avoid getting them hurt in his own quest for retribution, as he figures that he'll just solve everything himself, like whenever he wipes Orugio's memory. Keyfree is also noticeably good at realizing whenever Coco and Tarta are keeping secrets from him. Maybe he sees a bit of himself in them, as he's always been a secretive person, hiding his revenge from his master, his friends, and now his apprentices. Despite his refusal to trust Orugio or Mr. Nonola with his secrets, he tries his best to be someone who Coco can trust, and this does ultimately work, with her confiding in him about the problem with Kustas and the time reversal tattoo on Dagda. Despite being open to breaking the principles to help Coco, he doesn't seem to have any mercy ready for Inia, and he's got his eyes set on capturing her. And whenever the leech attacks, he gets another chance to go off on a brim hat. Eigendale. This is very satisfying, especially since Eigendale shot Coco in the head. Though I'm sure that Keyfree has had many moments of disillusionment and impact in the past, realizing that the secrecy of the witches not only couldn't stop the leech incident, but partially caused it, seems to have only further damaged Keyfree's trust in the system. Orugio is kind of a grouch, but that's mostly because he's constantly sleep deprived. I guess there's no magic coffee. Orugio makes magical contraptions, and all of his exude kindness, from the Snugstone, which he makes in order to help the apprentice and Keyfree sleep, to the very glowstone path that inspired Coco's love for magic whenever she was young. Orugio specializes in fire magic, to contrast Keyfree's water. And he also has the tendency to shrug off praise for his kind actions, dismissing them as what anybody would do in his position is a watchful eye. Orugio is constantly out in the town, helping ordinary people by doing small tasks for them and fixing things. He's truly dedicated to making the world a little bit better through his magic. However, like almost every other character, he ends up harboring feelings that go against the pact, whenever he encounters a boy whose hearing is so strong that it hurts him. If the unknowing boy was instead born a witch, he would have not only been able to use magic to improve his everyday life, but also would have likely been able to utilize his enhanced hearing with magic. But since he was born unknowing, all Orugio could do was make a magic scarf to dampen his hearing. Orugio later creates a fireball that can't hurt people, but that's the problem, as it teaches people that fire isn't dangerous, which could harm children. This emphasizes the responsibility of witches, is they have to make sure that their small spells and magic don't cause huge outward problems. It kinda reminds me of ethics training in engineering. The impacts of small actions is an ongoing theme for the Silver Eye Festival, and Orugio later solves the issue by encasing the fire in crystal. It's still technically harmless fire, but it doesn't teach kids that fire is safe. It just makes it seem like the crystals are protecting them from it. I feel like a better solution would have just been making a light bulb without a fire, but I guess a fireball is way cooler. Whenever we're first introduced to Uni, the focus is all on his worthless master. Seriously, that guy. Uni has very simple, but very smart visual characterization. With his hair covering his eyes, he often pulls at that hair whenever he's nervous, as if he's trying to somehow further cover his face with it. But whenever he shows more extreme emotions, whether they be positive or negative, you can see his eyes peek through the hair. Uni accepts his master's cruel words initially, blaming himself for making mistakes and causing trouble. But the second Uni starts the test, his master just runs off, fully expecting Uni to fail and leaving him in the hands of Keyfree. We see that Uni is fruitlessly chasing after his master's approval, believing that his master's opinion of him will improve if he somehow becomes a star apprentice, but his master obviously couldn't care less about him. As they start the test, he tries to stick to all the right ways to go about taking the test, figuring that he would just fail if he tried to do it his own way. Uni says that his master is always telling him that he isn't good enough. That's why he only studies the ways that others solve problems. Uni only tries to emulate others, so whenever he is forced to face a gap in the role that wasn't there last time, he instantly collapses, shouting that he doesn't have the talent, confidence, or any special skills like the other people. He can't draw a bow with someone watching him, and so he prepared all these spells beforehand, but with this unexpected gap, he's lost. Unlike Riche, who is individualistic to a fault, Uni wishes that he could be someone else, and here we see his eyes poke through his hair for the first time. But then with Riche's help, he realizes that, for once, the people surrounding him have his best interest in mind. They aren't here to harass or laugh at him like his master, and so he finally focuses and repurposes the seal inside of his coat to hide himself to help his anxiety. Uni's specialty is in studying other spells and repurposing them, and he demonstrates a complex understanding of what other spells do, changing them to fit his needs, both for the coat and in his spellbook, where he accounted for his own shaky hands by adding more sigils. Ironically, by hiding himself with a coat, we now see a little bit more of him, both in his unique style of magic and in his eyes, as now they are more visible behind his hair. He tells WHA that he hates himself a little bit less now, and then later, whenever the flying brimmed hats attack, Uni manages to blow up the ground. He believes he has saved Gat and WHA this way, and he's so happy because of this, he finally feels like he did something correctly. He's beginning to realize that his individual quirks and disadvantages can also be key to help him find things only he can do. But despite this growth, his first thought is that he should show this to his master. Prove to him that he's not worthless. He's still desperate for approval from the man who is likely one of the key sources of his anxiety. And then he gets wolfified. The cruelest part of this character arc is that right whenever he begins to be okay with being himself, he stops being himself. Though, through Coco's ingenuity and the other apprentices' help, they partially reverse his wolf spell, allowing him to communicate as a wolf. And then Coco steals the pendant with a forbidden magic to reverse Uni's wolfification. So now, with that pendant, Alaria and Uni are in hiding, running from the pointed hat witches who would have his memory erased for simply being the victim of forbidden magic. Of course, I don't know exactly how they do that, as they would still need the necklace on Uni at all times, lest he turn back into a wolf, so erasing his memory wouldn't work too well, unless they also did some forbidden magic of their own. Oh well. Later on, we catch up with Uni and Alaria in hiding, and it's interesting to see that Uni is still often hiding behind his wolf form. I like how Alaria emphasizes that Uni should be trying to solve issues instead of just taking the easy way out and avoiding them by becoming a wolf. It's true that it's probably hard on him now that his entire future is in flux, but I also like how Alaria talks about simply doing things daily that'll help you improve, looking just a little into the future and ensuring that you'll be in a better place then, rather than staying stagnant. Tarta is super chill. He kinda looks like a gnome, but that's okay. He lives with Mr. Nonoa and he helps him run the magic supply shop. But he's got color blindness. Sorry, I mean silver wash. Tarta initially believes that he has no hope of learning to use magic, as silver wash stops him from distinguishing colors, which is necessary for a witch. However, whenever he's trying to identify medicine to help Coco whenever she's sick, he has the idea of sucking the moisture out of the medicine and trying to identify it that way. However, this isn't enough, and he can't narrow them down enough. In this moment of frustration, Coco helps him out, using magic to revert the dust into the herbs which they came from, which Tarta can easily identify from his experience working at the magic store. And whenever the spell finally works and Tarta can finally recognize the herbs, you can see the wonder in his eyes, just like Coco in Chapter 1. Coco's magic has finally made it possible for him to overcome the silver wash. They were able to transform the world around Tarta to fit him. He used to think that it was impossible for him to become an apprentice, and that he wasn't fit to study because of his silver wash, but now he is sure that he can overcome any of his obstacles with magic. The ableism of witch society is a common theme in WHA Atelier, as witches have the privilege of magic, and therefore they often ignore the issues of unknowings and anybody with disabilities like Tarta. Transforming the world to make it a better place for everybody, even those who were originally overlooked, is a key theme with the first Kustas arc, and later the Silver Eye Procession arc. Tarta is probably the pointed hat witch who is the most critical of the pact, as he actually violates the agreement in order to study medicine in order to help Kustas. Tarta is sick of the restrictions, especially as they impact people with disabilities like him and Kustas the most. He's sick of being forced to give up on dreams because the world tells him that it's not allowed. He states it's the people who desperately need the world to change who are most deserving of the power to make it happen. Tarta experienced what it was like for him to use magic to transform his world into one that was better fit for him, and now he realizes that it would only be right for Kustas to get the same opportunity. He's another character who suffered because of the way that witch society has been set up, and he's another person who is rebelling in his own way. I think that his quote, "If I looked the other way when I knew I could help, it'd make me miserable," sums up his character well. Tarta is another witch who truly cares about helping others and making the world a better place, and again, the pact gets in the way of him being truly able to help people, especially Kustas. He feels absolutely awful for not teaching Kustas magic before he leaves, and because he chooses to uphold this part of the pact, Kustas loses all trust in him whenever he learns the truth. By the most recent arc, Tarta's lost a lot of the optimism that he gained whenever he first became a witch, as now he sees how unfair the world is for non-magic users. He's also lost a lot of trust in adults, seeing how they would have treated Kustas and Dagda. He can't trust somebody who couldn't help Kustas, and he wonders if he'll ever be able to find a teacher that he can really trust. I wonder if he'll end up becoming Kefri's student after this arc, as Kefri did in fact stand by Kustas. I kinda doubt he'll become a student, but it is a possibility. Orugio hypes up Bellajoot a lot, making him seem like a real monster, a disgustingly evil creature of scorn, only for him to basically act like Kefri 2.0, more unhinged edition. Bellajoot cares about spectacle and deception, so much of his magic is misdirection for the fun of it. He's incredibly dedicated to the principles, at least he acts like he is, but he's willing to work around conventions whenever he can, like whenever he creates the makeup test, and also lets Coco and WHA take the makeup test. Even though they obviously can't draw magic without looking, which kind of invalidates the entire purpose of the test, but whatever. Belligerent is partially bedridden and needs a still chair in order to move, and so he often creates clones using smoke sculptures in order to move around. He's also shown to be really fond of children and enjoys entertaining them with his flashy magic. I appreciate that despite being surrounded by and creating magic his whole life, Belligerent still has a love for magic like Coco's love. He prioritizes magic that is less useful and more beautiful, and also the dragon teacup magic that he has might be my favorite trinket in the entire series. However, Belligerent's fondness for deception doesn't just manifest in his daily antics. He believes it is a fundamental necessity for witches to be deceptive, stating that a witch that deals in truth contradicts their own existence. Belligerent is firmly against revealing the true nature of magic to the outside world, and he believes that Custos will not hesitate to violate the pact again because Custos believes in its potential to save. He believes that these actions will encourage other pointed hat witches to follow suit if allowed to happen, which will bring about the end of magic. Belligerent doesn't seem to see a problem with how the pact directly stops good from being done. It also seems to believe that most pointed hat witches actually would be willing to perform forbidden magic if they knew of its potential to save. He seems to see himself as somebody who's willing to make the hard decisions. Coco then argues that counterclock tattoos aren't actually forbidden magic, which is an argument that makes very little sense. However, seeing Coco cling to absurd hope leads Belligerent to put together a plan that is basically the same as Custos, but now it's not forbidden because of semantics. You see, Custos was drawing tattoos on people's skin, while Belligerent has a magic room and a magic spinny thing. While it's a clever solution that gets around the restriction of the pact, it does seem to demonstrate the hypocrisy of the pact. The two spells have the exact same effects, but the one that can be used by ordinary people anywhere in order to stabilize them is illegal, while the fancy, exclusive medical room, which can only be accessed by powerful witches like Belligerent, is legal. I believe that this is supposed to be a continuation of the themes presented through Rugio's Fireball Crystal earlier. Is by moving the counterclock spell to the special machine in the emergency room, it disconnects the magic from the spell and makes it clear that this is a very special situation where it can be used. But I think it also demonstrates the classism of the witch society, where the only thing determining if something is illegal or not comes down to your power and status. My favorite, Custos is cool, but also really tragic. From the beginning, we see that Custos is incredibly loyal to his master and adopted father, almost to a fault. Even whenever Dogda pleads with him to not risk it, Custos goes back to try to retrieve their cargo, and this attempted favor ultimately leads to him nearly being killed and with him losing the ability to walk, now needing to use a seal chair. Custos had it rough from a very early age, and in order to rationalize why he had it so much tougher than other people, like nobles and witches, he blamed it all on fate, believing that it was just his fate to have a harder life. However, Dogda rescues him from a life in the mud slums and teaches Custos how to perform with him. Around the time that Custos is reintroduced to Coco and begins learning herbs with Tarta, it seems that he has already made some peace with his life being hard, once again chalking it up to fate. But this has also resulted in him losing hope of becoming self-sufficient. So whenever Coco tries to encourage him, saying that there's hope for everybody, no matter where they are born, Custos' stare stops her dead in her tracks. And he angrily retorts that if he had been born with the ability to cast spells, and no worries about money or food, like Coco or Tarta, then he'd have hope. But fate was against him, and so life would be harder for him than other people. Coco was just trying to cheer him up, but her hopeful attitude came from a place of privilege, and meaningless statements of hope won't change the material reality that Custos has a tiny fraction of the opportunities that a witch like Coco has. But later, through magic, Coco and Tarta are able to give Custos the ability to fly, granting him a way to move around that allows him to avoid many of the pitfalls of a seal chair while also just being a lot of fun to use. I think it's very important that the first thing that Custos tells Dogda about these wings is that they have freed him. Custos has been stuck under the boot of fate. His circumstances and ignorance has held him down, but now at least he has some help. And once again, Custos makes some peace with his fate, now believing that though Coco and Tarta were fated to be born as witches, they were also fated to meet and help him. While he's thankful that others have helped him, he knows that he wouldn't have been able to survive without Dogda, Coco, and Tarta's help. He also hates having to rely on people, especially since Dogda is doing mercenaries work in order to pay for Custos' medical expenses, and this makes his realization that the way for him to become self-sufficient had been hidden from him his whole life all the more crushing. Despite Custos not knowing it, both Coco and Tarta have also experienced what it was like to have their dreams crushed due to how they were born, although the circumstances were less dire in their cases. These are my favorite three characters, and Custos' discovery of magic and adoption of a brimmed hat is by far my favorite ongoing arc. I think it really gets to the core of what makes this story interesting to me. After leaving the town with the Atelier, Dogda gets fatally wounded, and with the help of Ania, Tarta uses forbidden magic to save him, tattooing a time reverse spell onto him. This saves his life, but it has to be reapplied daily or Dogda will die. It also has the unfortunate effect of wiping his memory every time, trapping Dogda into a cycle of confusion and pain. So yeah, that is pretty horrifying. Custos learned the truth of magic, but he also learned the truth of its drawbacks. However, he is still willing to use this forbidden magic to help people. and he blames the weakness of healing magic on the Order's repression, and he's mostly right. Tarta wants to use magic, including forbidden magic, in order to defy fate, which has been keeping him down his whole life. After learning that everybody was lying to him, he no longer trusts anybody, and he always expects the worst from the Pointed Hat Witches, even Coco and Tarta, who saved his life and have been trying to help him. But once again, you really can't blame him. And whenever the leech attacks, he manages to save the lives of people in the mud slums, not only tattooing them with the counterclock spell, but also teaching them how to apply it to each other. Though it is a pretty nasty spell, its usage is absolutely justified, and eventually the Pointed Hat Witches begin to use it themselves, although they dress it up as a machine to pretend that they're better than Tarta. However, Coco cuts off the brim of Kustas' hat in order to try to fail Spelljuru and the Knights to look at Kustas without the bias that they have against Brimtats. Now, later whenever she talks, she's kind of just completely wrong, as she says that if Kustas is here to help, he should be wearing a different hat. This is obviously false, as Pointed Hat Witches aren't just here to help people. They place following the rules above human life. Brimmed Hat Witches, as evil as some of them are categorically the only sort of witch who can focus on helping people above all else, because they can save people even if it's against an arbitrary rule. It seems like Kustas has done something terrible in order to heal his feet. Kefri recognizes it from his pale eyes. Maybe it's related to the forbidden magic that Kefri discovered whenever he was trying to heal his eye. Maybe it has something to do with the new magic that the Brimtats were testing on Kefri, who is now losing his eyesight. In the end, Kustas is totally right that it's hypocritical for the Pointed Hat Witches to be okay with the time reverse magic now that they made some changes to make it more proper. It's totally hypocritical, but Kustas can't bring himself to truly hate Pointed Hat Witches. In one of the most recent chapters, he collapses. Hopefully it's just due to exhaustion, but the comments from Kefri make me think that it could be much worse. Prince WHA is a pretty minor character, but he's super interesting as it's hard to read him. On the surface, he's just a kid who is interested in magic like Coco once was, but he also seems to have the ambition of his father, and he often talks about working to take what he wants. In the evacuation camp, WHA talks to Revolution, and I really like how he says it's normal to feel and act differently than everybody else. It really seems like him and his father mostly had the good of the people in their mind. Of course, this could be dangerous if they were to gain the power of magic and use it to wage war justified by being for their people. But it's hard to say if they would truly do more evil than good if given the power. And together with Revolution, Riche, and Titia, WHA helps make the camp a lot better for people, especially people who had similar issues with the crowds as Revolution. It's interesting that the manga takes its time off of the more pressing matters to focus on little things like this, but I think that it's a good showcase of how magic can always be used to make people's lives better. Plus, it shows good character development for Revolution with the help of Prince Ezrist. Revolution spoke up about his pain, and that made it possible for it to be solved, which is a really good theme. So I'm just going to end this section on WHA Atelier by going over some things about the Knights Morales, what I think about the rules and the pact and forbidden magic, and also some predictions for the future. First off, wiping memories. I think it's made pretty clear that this is a very evil punishment, and many members of the Knights Morales are way too eager to give it out. Easties in particular really seems to want to wipe the memories of every 12-year-old he meets. Gaga getting his mind wiped also shows the terrible effects of what having one's mind wiped can do to an individual and the people that they love. Despite that, Anya is correct, as she's doing the exact same thing that any knight would have done to her. However, that still doesn't make it okay for her to do it. It seems like not all Brimtats are the same. Some, like Eikendale and Iguin, are very clearly evil, doing irreversible damage to people and putting children like Coco into constant danger. Others like Inua and now Kustas seem to want to get rid of the rules, rediscover healing magic, and make the world a more fair place. Despite these seemingly acceptable reasons, Inya does do some pretty terrible things, like strapping a bomb to Coco and Tarta and wiping Galga's mind. And she and her master Resties could be hiding more sinister motivation. Eikendale, however, is the worst of the worst, a powerful witch who believes that he should be able to subjugate others because of his power. Believing might makes right. He's the very sort of person who the pact was created in order to stop from getting access to powerful magic, and yet he's not only existed as a Pointed Hat Witch, but became one of the wise. His very existence proves that the pact is ineffective in stopping power-hungry witches from using magic to control others. Although he is somewhat right that it's horrible that he can't get the healthcare that he needs because healing magic is restricted, and human doctors are too expensive, that justifies absolutely nothing. I personally think that the pact should be abolished. Everybody should have the chance to be a witch and use magic in everyday life. However, there definitely needs to be laws and regulations in order to prevent magic from being used in war, and the most dangerous and forbidden magic needs to be repressed at all costs. And the materials that can do things like the forbidden ink that Eigen was using need to be locked away. Of course, this is all easier said than done, but it's obvious that the pact is doing a very poor job of stopping evil witches from doing terrible things right now, and it would be much better to ensure that the average person isn't living in ignorance of the dangers of magic. Plus, the total eradication of poverty and scarcity that freed magic could bring would be nice. I think that most healing magic should probably be brought back. It seems that there are normal healing potions and things that are 100% positive and were banned. But I'm sure that whatever magic Kustos used to heal his feet has some big downside. In my opinion, the justification that healing magic was a slippery slope into immortality was always a bad excuse to completely decimate the medical technology of your entire world, but hey, that's just me. The most recent chapter that's been released as of the time that I'm writing this script is chapter 79. So what are my predictions going forward? Well, I expect Easties to get stopped. Hopefully he'll actually face some consequences for attacking his superiors, children, and basically trying to murder a bunch of people by destroying medical equipment because of his obsession with the Pact. I kinda do hope that this Leech arc ends soon. The pacing is really slowed, especially since the manga went monthly. Despite that, I think it's still very interesting what's going on, especially with what might happen after all this is said and done, as there really is no way that we're completely going back to the status quo. I think that Kustos will probably run off again, maybe after getting Dogda healed, although he might just straight up die because of what Kefir was talking about with his pale eyes. I think that Keem Ezres will partner Afinia or Orestes, either becoming a real danger to the peace of the world, or maybe just pushing for the return of healing magic. I think that Coco will keep her facial injury, although it might fade a bit. Another thing that I can't overlook is that practically every major and several minor characters have had a rebellious awakening, to the point where most of them believe that ordinary people and witches live together, possibly also meaning that they believe that the pact to hide magic should be removed.
But yeah, those are my thoughts and some of my analysis over WHA Atelier. I really think that it's an incredibly good and unique fantasy manga that does a great job balancing its tone between something upbeat and fitting of the shoujo genre and the more mature themes and somewhat difficult to answer questions that it poses. I'm cautiously excited for the announced anime. I doubt it could ever get close to matching the manga's art, but at the very least, it'll hopefully expand the fanbase a bit and give us some good music. By the way, this video is based on a previous one that I made that covered both Frieren and WHA Atelier on my other channel, which is mostly dedicated to game development. So it wasn't really a good fit for the channel, and I also spoiled both series over the video, so that kind of ruined the average watch time and tanked the video. So I'm reworking the original video into this one and a future Frieren video, where I'll add a lot more discussion about the series, especially later manga exclusive things. I can maybe also cover some other mangas and future videos in the series, so be sure to comment any fantasy manga that you think are on the same level as Frieren and WHA Atelier that you want me to cover. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to subscribe and check out my other channel where I make video games if you're interested in that.